Možemo. Dobar dan svima. Jel se čujemo?
Good day, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We apologize. We had some technical issues. That's why we are a bit late. Good day and welcome to another round of consultations on the integrated national energy and climate plan on behalf of Belgrade Open School and RERI Institute. We wish you welcome and thank you for being interested in this very important document. Some global reasons are maybe turning our attention somewhere else, but this is a third round of consultations. And today we will be able to see how far we are with this process. We have the representatives of the Ministry of Mining and Energy. We can talk about how far this process went, and there are going to be different experts. We'll be able to talk about other aspects as well. This is just a reminder. This plan helping us to see how we are going to lead Serbia through decarbonization in order to reach some of the green agenda goals, as well as Paris Agreement and some other initiatives that require harmonization of many sectors, especially energy sector, in order to help with the climate change. The process of developing this plan is a bit complex. Now we are in this pre-election phase, so the focus will be somewhere else, but that does not mean that the importance of this document is less important. On the contrary, it's important to remind ourselves why it is important and how, where it can lead us. First of all, Christina and myself, Christina, would you like to say a few words? No, we will give you a summary, especially about the public participation concerning the decarbonization. But we will talk about all the steps that we took so far, and in later on we'll talk about other topics that you can see in the agenda. So now I'm going to ask to see the slide. Okay, so this is the overview of some of the steps that we have already done. I will tell you about the normative framework for this process. By the amendments to the law on energy in 2021, the integrated plan became part of the public policy system of the Republic of Serbia, and as such it found its place. The process of its adoption is regulated by different documents of EU and recommendations of the Ministerial Council of the Energy Community, but some other acts as well. So we have a law on the public administration that applies on this, because the public administrations, when they start working on some acts, they need to inform the public that this process had begun. And it has to give some basic information on the planned solutions and other impacts and effects. Then we have a law on planning system that is regulating the process of adoption of the public policy documents. And this is this plan, definitely. So we need to inform the public at the beginning of the development of this document, the internet page. This needs to be published as well on the e-governance and so on. So the first step is to inform the public. And when we talk about public participation, that is something that is actually at the very beginning, and Christina will tell you something more about that. So the further process of adoption is affected by different bylaws. We have as well laws on planning system, methodology of management of public policies, and different other documents that say that there is this principle of public participation, partnership, and within this, there should be a transparent process. We have to do the regulatory impact assessment and performance of certain public policies. And we need to have a consultation process as well, which is transparent. So we have public discussion before the document is being adopted and public consultations that are implemented in different phases. So apart from that, we have the law on the public participation, public legal protection and so on. We have the Arcus Convention, which says that there should be participation for all stakeholders in early phases, so where the all options are still open before any decision is taken, so that the public participation would really make some sense. So these laws and bylaws actually are regulating how this should look like, and the point is that they say that the public should be informed and they should have enough time to take a look at the documents, to understand the consequences and to give their contribution, and the contents of the document must reflect the opinion of the public. When I say public, I'm not talking about the organizations of civil society, because they're not only public, because I'm talking about the academia, citizens, ordinary people, different types of professional associations, local self-government units, different associations, and so on. So all these stakeholders, and this is the public policy that will affect all the stakeholders, they should all have the possibility to be involved and give their contribution to this process. Why is this important from our point of view? Well, first of all, because we have the laws that are obliging us to do so in the Republic of Serbia, but basically the main point is because different stakeholders can contribute in a good quality way. Maybe some other stakeholders don't understand these problems at the moment of designing, so they can contribute with their knowledge that is not otherwise accessible. So in the end, we could have documents that we have all consented about, so we have contributed to the process of its development. So that's all from my side. Christina will tell us how things look like, and she's going to tell us about the steps in the previous year. Thank you. So I would like to give a summary of certain steps. First of all, this project has been done within the EPA project, so further development of capacities for energy planning. So that was from February 2021 to August 2022. In February, when we started with this, we have signed a contract with the consultants, and at the beginning of March, we have established 2 working groups. At the very beginning, when we formed these working groups, we had no civil society organizations representatives. After that, in April, we have informed the public that we started with drafting the National Energy and Climate Plan. However, it was very short, and we explained that this document is important and that it's important to do this as quickly as possible. And after that, there were 3 introductory meetings, one in April, in May, and in June. So those were working group meetings without the representatives of civil sector, and according to the information that we have received from the Ministry of Mining and Energy, at the end of May, beginning of June, we had meetings with people from the academia, the faculties, and so on. So we don't know what was the subject of the meetings, whether it was to collect data or it was counseling regarding some material issues. So after that, in July 2021, there was a competition announced for the participation of civil society in the work of these working groups, and they were nominated in August 2021. So in the same month, there was a draft of this National Energy and Climate Plan. There were these two chapters that are the measures of public policies, but they were explained to the representatives of working groups. After that, RERI in October sent a request to the Ministry of Energy and Mining so that this process should become more transparent and more participatory, and to include wider public and to inform them, because there are so many people who are not aware. They don't know enough as much as they should in order to be informed and pass decisions on certain solutions that are being proposed within this plan. After that, in the Ministry of Energy and Mining, in November 2021, they informed the public that uh, this plan is being developed, that there are 33 scenarios, 3 were selected, and they explained about the composition of this plan, why it is important, but we are pointing to the fact that what's really missing is this baseline, which contain the problem in an area. We did not get any description of the problem, so the wider public does not know about the situation in the energy and climate change. And after that, we should set the goals and expected effects. So, among other things, RERI asked from the Ministry of Energy and Mining to open this procedure, and they did that in certain ways. We asked the public to be informed. They did so through this notification that I'm mentioning in November 2021. Also, it was there were some comments on RERI. So from these answers, the ministry could actually learn a lot and to collect certain information about the procedure of drafting this plan. And finally, for the second time, they are answering our calls to take part in these public consultations that we are organizing, where it's really important for them to present to the public where we are right now and what are the future steps that expect us in the next period. However, these are really good steps in legal terms, but when we talk about some very important documents, it is really necessary to set the bar a bit higher. It's necessary to have additional readiness demanded because in that sense, maybe we need to take some additional steps in order for this process to become even more transparent. And our proposal that in October, we mentioned this proposal, but we repeated this at the meeting of the working group where we took part as well, is that some documents that are relevant for informing the public should be made available to this public. First of all, we are talking about these different scenarios. So 33 developed scenarios about the inputs and results of the modeling. And the ministry said that they are ready to disclose all this data. We think that's very important, but according to our information, they did not do that. They're not available to the public, only to the to the representatives of the working groups. In that sense, such procedure would actually enable efficient and effective public participation. And as my colleague said, we would have a good quality plan that would respond to the needs, if not everyone's needs, but most of the citizens' needs in the Republic of Serbia. And I also would like to emphasize in the context of the drafting this document, it's too late when it's already done. And in that sense, if we are mentioning the Arcos Convention, if you have the draft, you already have chosen certain scenarios, then we cannot go one step back and say, okay, out of those 33, let's consider maybe some other were better and let's do the modeling for those scenarios. Simply put, this is not the way how things are done. And in that sense, I really think that we have enough time still for this procedure to become even more transparent. And we are inviting the ministry to make these data available, because this is one of the ways to open up this.
So what is Christina saying? Those are requirements of the legal framework, the law on the planning system describes in details what it is to be done, especially in the first phases of the draft creation, and it really shares information. But what we have to remind ourselves is that we have to step up and to create a document available to the public. Apart from that procedure would not only be in accordance with our desires and the legal frameworks, but also the recommendations of the European Commission, which said for chapter 15 and 27 that there are key recommendations, and it expressed expectations that Serbia should include adopt an ambitious climate plan, which should be adopted in a participative way. And that is a recommendation from the progress report and an expectation from us. So that would be the framework that where we were, and the moment in which we are at the currently. That's a scenario that we are mentioning, 3 scenarios which include that the decisions have to be made. We have to see where we will go and when we should expect the further steps. And it is now necessary to know that in April we will have elections, and then the post-election period when most of the authorities, state and local authorities are in a sort of halt because they have to restructure, which allows us to have an additional time for making this further step towards inclusivity of this process. So that would be all from us. In the next session, from 11:30, we will have the representatives of the Ministry of Energy, and we will hear how we are moving towards the energy in the transition and the integrated national energy and climate plan. At the moment in which we are, it is very important when it comes to the energy transition, having in mind the global and European events in the Ukraine and the disturbances at the energy market. And the decisions are very important that we are making now. So this discussion will be very important. So I would like to invite all of you to participate. Mirko will come here instead of us. So this was all from us. Thank you.
Dobro, možemo odmah bez pauze da nastavimo.
So we can continue without a break. As my colleague said, this is the third round of consultations, and for the second time, we have also the Ministry of Energy together with us at the panel, which is in the process of decision-making in Serbia, very relevant and a huge success, I would say, and a good result that we discuss, although we don't always agree on things. I wouldn't say that this exhausts the possibilities to expand the dialogue and include different stakeholders, but I would like to say that the ministry, and I wouldn't be able to say that the ministry has done everything, because that would be the exhaustion of possibilities, because ministry has more options. But I have to say that through this process, we have made an effort to really include different stakeholders and interested parties, also those whose concepts of future energy policy are in a collision, to bring them to a joint panel and a joint discussion. And that is not easy, and that's not really a practice which is used in Serbia. So I'm not going to say that we have done whatever we can as RERI and the Belgrade Open School, and that we cannot do better when it comes to these consultations. But it is important to say that this discussion has to be positioned in a way that it uses the exchange of opinions, which are not always the same, and to reach something which is the best for the strategy of energy policy for the future, in which the National Energy Climate Plan is one of the umbrella documents. And I have the pleasure to give the floor to Mrs. Biljana Ramic. She is the manager of the Department for Strategic Planning from the Ministry of Energy, and she will tell us what are the next steps in adopting the National Energy Climate Plan. And before I give her the floor, I want to say that it is important that we continue working on the plan, and that to finish with it, hopefully by responding to the requests that we have accepted, and that we will be able to prepare Serbia to join the train, which is supposed to lead us to climate neutrality by 2050. Hello, thank you. I would like to say in the beginning that I'm here today instead of Mrs. Maja Matija-Ristic, Secretary of the Ministry and Coordinator of the Working Group for the creation of the Integrated National Energy and Climate Plan, who unfortunately was not able to be here with us today at this panel. But I hope that I will be able to give you some information which are significant when it comes to the creation of this document. And thanks to RERI and the organization of this panel, that we will be able to present to the public what this document represents and how long and complex the process of its creation and adoption is. So I would like to say that the adoption of any strategic document which defines new policy in current conditions is a very complex and a long-lasting and demanding task, which requires consultations and involvement of a broader and expert public, and that is not easy to do, especially we are talking here about the integrated plan. That is not easy because we are adopting it in a specific moment for Serbian energy sector, which is, as I like to say, a historical moment, because so far in the previous years, we have mostly talked about the objectives that the Serbia and the Serbian energy sector had until 2020, which were defined based on the agreement on energy community. And now we are confronted with a challenge, which is not easy, and where we have to define what are our goals up to 2030 with a vision up to 2050. So our objectives have to do with the reduction of greenhouse gases reduction, emission reduction, increase of energy efficiency, having in mind the structure of the energy sector of the Republic of Serbia as it is at this moment, and these challenges are really not small. However, what we should use in order to relax a little bit when creating this new energy policy is the fact that the law on energy defines also the monitoring of this energy policy, monitoring of its implementation, reporting about its implementation. In the case of the integrated plan, that's the creation of 2-year years reports, which are submitted to the government and the Secretary of the Energy Community, and based on which we have to update this document. I have to say that planning every strategic document, in this case, the integrated plan, starts a lot before this phase, and that it is not easy to be able at every moment in the process to do the best possible. It is always, of course, possible to do better, but it is not easy, and the challenge and the situation when we have to start working on the integrated plan, we were confronted with that in 2018 for the first time, when the energy community, based on the practice which has been established in the EU, has made a recommendation of the Ministry Council about the creation of the integrated national and energy and climate plans, based on which the members of the energy community have started working on that document. So this has been done in line with the practice of the EU, which has a few years previously started intensive preparations for the introduction of this obligation in their member states. And the member states had approximately 2 years to create and adopt the integrated national energy and climate plan. So 1 year is supposed to be used for the creation of the draft document. And after that, there were consultations with the European Commission and the revision correction of the document and its adoption and submission of the final report, for which also 1 year was foreseen. All in all, in practice, in real life, in many countries needed more than 2 years to reach the phase of the final document. All of these final documents you can find at the website of the European Union. They are available, their draft versions, and also the comments and consultations with the European Commission, as well as the final versions of these documents. So we were confronted with the recommendation of the energy community with a signed, ratified Paris Agreement, and then also with the signed Sofia Declaration, with which we are accepting the Green Agenda for Western Balkans. So we were confronted with the need to create an integrated energy plan, although this need is there anyway. And it is necessary to have new goals for the development of Serbian energy, because the last objectives were valid until 2020. These objectives that we have to define now have to be a contribution to the objectives of the EU in global for 2030 up to 2050, something which is also specific not only for Serbia, but for all countries signatories of the energy agreement compared to the countries of the EU, and we have to bear that in mind. Is that the signatories about the agreement on energy community didn't have in the previous period the obligation to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions, and they didn't have this trading system of emissions, and they were not part of all of those programs that the EU had for their member states. Let me remind you, in the EU, for their member states, they have the possibility, and they are working on the reduction of emissions since 2005. So since 2005, they have the trading scheme, and this practice of 15 years, which the EU countries have used, and they had different possibilities which were given to them by the EU. That's something which gives them a certain advantage compared to the countries signatories of the Energy Community Agreement, which were not part of all of that. So we are not really in an equal position, and we are now confronted with a challenge, and that is a challenge to really, in an adequate way, just like EU countries, respond to these new requirements and objectives, which are now recommended by the European Union and European Commission by 2030, or climate neutrality by 2050. So in line with that, we have started preparations for the creation of the integrated plan, and we have come into the situation, just like previously the colleagues Christina and Mirjana mentioned. We have started last year in February the project. The project has started, the project within which the integrated plan is worked on. And in April, there was the first meeting, official meeting, which started the creation. The meeting was presided by the Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Mining and Energy, Professor Zorana Mihajlović. And this statement was published at the website of the ministry. Also, other information were sent in line with the procedures of projects financed from IPA funds. Also, 2 working groups were established because the project doesn't work only on the creation of the integrated plan. So this working group is huge, and it is very important for the creation of the integrated plan. It includes, next to the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Environmental Protection and the Agency for Environmental Protection and other ministries. It includes the Statistical Office of the Republic, the Chamber of Commerce, National Bank of Serbia, Energy Agency, relevant energy companies, the Serbian Academy of Arts and Sciences. And of course, as it was said, we have also published a public call and included representatives of NGOs. Those are the standing members of our working group, representatives of the Belgrade Open School, the RAS Foundation. There are also representatives of the European Bank for Renewal and Development. And at all meetings of the working group were invited, and also the whole material was also submitted to the representatives of the EU, of the European Commission, and the Secretary of the Energy Community. So we also had consultations with them. The implementation, in the process of creation, what the whole process makes complicated and on the other side necessary is the implementation of different laws which have to be integrated, implemented in the process of adopting such an important document. As it was already said, those are the law on energy, the law on the planning system, and also the law on the strategic assessment of the influence upon the environment, which says that beside the document, it should also be worked on the report on the strategic evaluation of the environmental influence and to have public consultations and border crossing consultations. I have to say that we have implemented this law also in the previous period when we worked on the current strategy of energy development, where the public consultations lasted for 4 months with 7 public consultations. There were specific separate public consultations for the report about the strategic influence on the environment. There were also border crossing consultations. Only one of them was meant for the representation, for the representatives of the energy community, the diplomatic corps, and the energy commission. So we are really making an effort to fulfill what is our legal obligation and what the international agreements say. But I have to point out, when we are talking about the convention and consultations, those are all documents which can, in a way, should in a way say that it is necessary in the process of adopting new policies, include above all the relevant and other public, and to create a synergy, a constructive approach in the process of adopting new policies of all interested parties so that they can equally participate in it. But no agreement and law, and also the law on the planning system, they don't prescribe how, at which moment and in what way, and that is given to each country to do it in its own way, in the way that the country can practice the adoption of such documents. In that sense, I have to say that most of the EU countries which have adopted and which have adopted their integrated plan, they have, most of them, they've opened consultations after they created the draft document. I have to remind you again, in the process of adopting this document, only half of that step is done. The job is not done. So that was the practice of most of the European countries. What are early public consultations, and to which extent should the public be included? That is given to every country's decision so that the country organizes it itself.
So we have opened up the process of consultations quite early, and we gave the possibility of decision making to different stakeholders, having in mind that we still haven't done the draft of the integrated plan, and this is just half of the task, because after the draft of the integrated plan. We have public consultations, public discussions, consultations with the Secretary of Energy Community, and then we have to revise the whole document again. So basically, we are now in the process of drafting the integrated plan. We collected all the necessary data, basic data required for drafting the integrated plan and the scenarios. And based on that, we have prepared what was possible at this point. So what has been prepared and what has been presented to the public in August 2021? We, until August, performed many consultations. The topic was the fifth dimension of energy union. The energy integrated plan has to describe all five. One is innovations, and we did a lot of consultations with different faculties, institutes, Serbian Academy of Arts and Sciences, and this was a chapter that we could do independently of the scenarios. So we did a lot of consultations, and based on those consultations, we have prepared a text for this chapter. It's definitely not a final version. It will require some upgrades, definitely. Also, the consultant has prepared 33 working scenarios, starting from the widest possible scope of possible solutions for further development of Serbian energy, and we presented that at the meeting of the working group. We also presented it to the European Commission, Secretariat of the Energy Community, and we offered the widest possible scope of solutions in August. And based on that, we have submitted all this material to all of them and offered the possibility for them to say whether something should be corrected, added, or maybe they can propose their own solutions as well. Also, we gave the possibility to have bilateral meetings with the ministry or the consultants in order to clarify the proposed solutions. After that, based on the series of consultations and analysis, we came to a wider, a narrowed selection, because 33 scenarios, that's a lot, a huge number. So we reduced this number to actually 9 versions, 3 versions without nuclear power and 3 with nuclear energy, plus additional 3 versions where we consider the possibility to have 100% renewable energy resources in this energy mix of gross final consumption by 2050. So these results, together with all the inputs and explanations, have been delivered to the working group, and they were presented at the meeting of the working group, which was held on the 4th of February 2022. So we involved RERI at this meeting. So all these working scenarios were delivered, but I have to emphasize that this is just a proposal of working scenarios. So at the meeting, there was a proposal. It was demanded from everyone to propose their own comments, corrections, or to give suggestions as to how this should be revised, how all these scenarios should be revised, if they think that something should be done differently, of course, or maybe something is not good enough from their point of view. I also have to say that we are now analyzing 3 additional scenarios. One refers to the proposal by the Secretariat of the Energy Community, where we would try to see, in order to compare, how it would look like and what that would mean for Serbia if in 2030 or 2050 it would have the same goals as the EU goals, so at the level of EU. So not according to individual countries or member states. Other scenarios, having in mind the current energy situation here and on the global level, because we see that the situation in the last few months is really changing intensively, and that it's quite dramatical, so to say. So we proposed 2 more scenarios, working scenarios, in order to analyze the maximum participation or share of renewables, so that this imports, so that we don't depend on the import, actually. At this point, these analyses are being performed. So when they are completed, the results will be available and we can compare them with other results. So everything will be presented to the working group, as was the case so far. We sent it to the European Commission as well and Secretariat of the Energy Community. So the consideration of all these results, actually the consideration of scenarios and meaning of these scenarios, have sense only if, based on the proposed or selected scenarios, there are policies and measures and activities proposed which say specifically what is necessary for one of the scenario or several selected scenarios that we think should be presented in the integrated plan and are the future vision of the development of Serbia. So what is necessary for the scenario to be realized? I believe that so far this is not sufficient for the wider public. We're still not in a situation to choose the scenario or scenarios that will be presented in the draft of the integrated plan, and we're still dealing with working versions, with drafts. So what I'm trying to say is that we still don't have any adopted decision in the process of drafting the integrated plan. Our intention in the next period is to present all these results and scenarios, including these new results. And there is a question now arising, since the integrated plan needs to contain 1 or 3 scenarios. How are we going to go to the narrowed down selection? How we are going to reduce it to 1 or 2 scenarios? How are we going to decide which scenarios we would like to propose and based on which we would define some activities and measures that would be subject to wider discussion, whether we can carry out all these measures and to which extent. In that sense, we have proposed to use the multi-criteria analysis, and our consultant has prepared the two multi-criteria analysis based on several relevant indicators. It was proposed to mark these scenarios. So they contain certain indicators that would have some value, and through them we would grade these scenarios in order to get a list or selection of scenarios. So this analysis has been presented to the working group and the European Commission and Secretariat of the Energy Community at the meeting held on the 9th of February. And of course, now the situation and these three analyses will require for this multi-criteria analysis to be revised in order to include these three working scenarios. Further steps in the integrated plan or the process of its drafting and adoption are actually known because they are defined through the project tasks or laws that prescribe what we're supposed to do in the process of drafting and adopting the integrated plan. So, as I already mentioned, after the completion of this analysis, we will have a working group with representatives. We will present these results and we will organize the assessment of the scenarios based on that, based on this decision on scenarios. We will be able to define the policies, measures, and activities that are necessary to implement in order to realize the scenario, and why we believe that these are exactly those measures, policies, and activities that the wider public should assess. And after that, we will organize public consultations, cross-border consultations, and official consultations with the Secretariat of the Energy Community. Also, in parallel with this, we will do the report on strategic issues. This is going to be the topic of all these consultations. So also, we have the obligation, according to the law on strategic impact assessments, that after all the consultations, we do the report on all the consultations held concerning the integrated plan and the report on the environmental impact assessment and so on. So we need to inform the public about all these things mentioned. Based on all these consultations and delivered reports and how these comments are implemented in the draft of integrated plan, we're going to prepare or revise the draft of the text that will then be the topic of adoption, subject to adoption by the Republic of Serbia, as is proposed in the energy law. So what are the exact steps and how this dynamics will take place? I have to say that in the next period, when we get these results, we will agree with the ministry and we will tell this to the working group. So our desire was that this integrated plan should be done as soon as possible, but the process is very complicated. It's not simple and it requires a lot of consultations. As you can see, we are really trying to involve in the processes, although I emphasize, we did not make any decision. We did not decide about a single scenario. We did not decide on a single situation based on which the draft of the text of the integrated plan could be done. So we're inviting as many stakeholders as possible. We are involving them We have, in the meantime, RERI becoming involved in this communication, and in parallel, we have these consultations with the process of developing. So this is in line with the developments. So the steps are known and nothing is uncertain. We know how things should be done, but in which time framework, I really cannot tell you, because that is something that we will agree upon, having in mind the situation. I'm referring to the period before the election. So there is a pre-election campaign at this point. It's very difficult to say exactly when we will be able to organize public consultations and cross-border consultations, but these consultations that are necessary in order to get some draft. So all these things are being done and they will be done in the next period. In that context, I have one suggestion about these consultations that RERI is organizing, and I would like to thank them for the turnout, participation, and in a way promotion of the importance of this document and encouraging, raising awareness of the public about the need to participate in defining the public policies. My suggestion is that these are consultations, not public consultations, because public consultations are organized by those who are making the document, so ministry. So I think that I managed to give an overall picture of the situation and the developments and the practice in Europe. So I have to say, as for Europe and the member states, they have adopted their integrated plans. They adopted it. You can find them on the website of the European Union in English version as well. So now, having in mind that the European Union has worked on Green Deal and proposing of new goals, so they are obliged to update their integrated plans. So the situation, because for many years I've been dealing with the strategic document drafting, I have to say that there's always a new situation, and we simply cannot wait, although we know some new situation will take place. At one point, you have to finish a document, make a cut, the same as the EU countries have done. So they passed these plans, although they were preparing a new policy of Green Deal with some new tasks and goals. So the situation is the same here, but the law on energy, as is the practice in EU, is defining the need to update those documents, which means that it is important to pass the document, and it's also very important to monitor its implementation and to define whether there is a need to correct things, to update things. Are we achieving the measures and policies that we have defined, or there are certain discrepancies, why it's necessary to update the document? So every 2 years, we'll have the obligation to report. So we will update the document itself. What I want to say is that this is just the beginning of the process. Nothing has been completed by passing the integrated plan. We are just opening up a process that should have some sort of intensity and constant features, and we should all take active part in it, and we should try in every next step to be even better. That's all. Thank you.
otvorimo jednu...
Thank you, Mrs. Ramić. Before we start this short discussion, first of all, I have to say the suggestion is accepted when it comes to the term public consultation. What we wanted to say with it, achieve with it, is to stimulate all participants to think about the public character of the process. And we wanted to implement a methodology to allow everybody to participate who wants to participate. So we have opened a few channels of communications, and we will continue working like that. We can meet in person. We are using the Zoom platform also for those who are not able to come to us to participate and discuss. And also all of these consultations we are presenting in Facebook for those who would like to see and hear what we talk about. But we accept the suggestion. Thank you. Just a few more words. I hope then that you will inform us when you have an indicative plan and a timeline. And another thing that I would like to remind everybody, I think that's the result of this process. The ministry has at the website opened a subsection, comments and recommendations of the civil society, where also some responses of comments of RERI were given. I think that's also a right way, and I would like to invite not only the participants today, but also other people to continue discussing with the ministry. And since we have that possibility, I hope that that will be now used so that we can expand the number of participants and the quality of discussion and its transparency. So we now have time for a short discussion. First, I would like to invite the participants who are here on Zoom to ask questions or comment. And after that, I will give also the floor to the people here in person. Do we have somebody who would like to say something on Zoom? Yes, you can ask the question. Maybe if you can turn on your camera. Hello, and hello to everybody, and thank you for organizing this consultation. I would just like to say, since Mrs. Ranic mentioned the analysis and that it would be adapted to other three scenarios. So if you have now more information what that means and how that will be adopted, I would like to hear that. So when it comes to the multi-criteria analysis, that is a tool for scenarios, for the assessment of proposed scenarios which were presented at the meeting of the working group on the 4th of February. And these results had not included the three additional scenarios which are now worked on. So in the multi-criteria analysis, that is a tool which has given the possibility to assess those scenarios which were presented so far. Since after that meeting with the working group on the 4th of February, since there was the need to additionally analyze other scenarios, that means that also the multi-criteria analysis next to all of these scenarios until the 4th of February should include also the three new scenarios, so that also the results of these three scenarios can be evaluated. This will, of course, be presented to the working group. We are open. I'm now talking preliminary. Once it is done and presented, we can then also more concretely respond to your question. Thank you. Is there anybody else from Zoom who would like to ask? No, we have here somebody. with us who would like to ask something? Thank you. Mrs. Ramic, I would like to go back to the part where you said we still haven't made any decision. We haven't reached any decision. And we are still consulting, and I think that that's a huge, good practice, and I hope that also other authorities will adopt that practice to open documents. But because no decision has made, now it is a good moment to start with the convention, which says that the processes have to be opened when the options are still open. We had 33 options, now we have 3. It is really difficult to come down from 33 options to 3 options. So some decisions have started to be made. And I would like to create a difference between consultations and the public debate. You said that after the draft, we have the public consultations, but the loan planning system says that the consultations are being done during the phase of the creation of the draft. And these consultations are taking place with specifically interested groups. We are here also talking about the broader public, and after the draft has been created, before it is adopted, then there are public consultations with public debate, public presentation, and so on. So we are now at a good moment to open, because we haven't made any decision, we have an idea in which direction we will go. I think that we are not too late with that. So this is more of a comment, not so much a question. Well, I agree with you. We are not too late. When talking about public consultations, I meant the usual process after the draft of the document is created and it is presented at the website. And I have to say that we have now also a new website that we are obliged to use, and those are e-consultations, which we have been informed about. So I believe once we have the concrete plan for the coming months, we will inform the working group and also you. So it will be well known how the thing will evolve in future. I am Professor Ivanovic. I am teaching ecological subjects. My question, which I had also at our last occasion, what are the prices of the consequences if a country does not fulfill the expectation, and whether the current approach of updating can it allow that we allow nuclear power plants, which we didn't have previously, that will require time and money, and whether the people, when it comes to the renewable energy sources, that it would be necessary to calculate how much it costs to transition to solar panels and to wind parks, wind generators. That's why it is necessary to have calculations, financial calculations. And finally, what do you what is coming in future, we don't know. This is a time of huge changes in all areas. And also politically, it happens like a tsunami, like the coronavirus. So the Nord Stream 2 is blocked. The price of gas, you saw, was increased by 10%, and now it is reduced. Now the heating in Great Britain is 2 to 3 times more expensive. And if somebody doesn't have money to pay these prices, you have to buy a cat to heat yourself. What was agreed with Russia, the lower gas prices, and that was really 4 times cheaper. Now, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Chadish, said a few days ago that that gas price, which will last for another month and a half, 13 times lower than for other countries. What will happen after this month and a half? We don't know. There will be spring, and we won't need heating, or we will buy cats. So it is important to see this geopolitical situation, to put it into the multi-factor analysis. But that's not a question. The question is only the financial calculation. We should see it is very smart that you are expanding new models and proposing new models. Unfortunately, the time has come when we really don't know how we could adapt to the climate changes. But the geopolitical situation as a factor is an important factor as well. Thank you. I am expecting next time to hear at least about the prices. Just a small comment. I am not for the coal. I am not for lithium, but the lithium batteries have a huge perspective. So I am sure that there will be many scenarios and models. Thank you. Thank you for this comment. I have to say, I remember you from the panel in November. You were also here. So one of the results in modeling are also the expenses and how much the realization of such a scenario costs. And in order to reach those results, we definitely have to know the prices as well. I have to use this opportunity. You have reminded me of something that I have not said. So first of all, we have a reference scenario. I am not sure that I have understood when you say analysis or presentation of the current situation, what you mean with that. We have done as it is a practice in the modeling process. We have a reference scenario which shows what it would look like if we would continue with the current policies. Everything which are input data in the modeling process, which we use the 4 scenarios and which are important drivers, as they are called by experts who are working with softwares, or parameters which are influencing results. They have been presented in our documents that we have given to the working group, and RERI has seen them as well. And they can, and it is possible to comment these input parameters, all of those data, projection of the population, of the GDP, price of the energy sources, which have been used, and these parameters influence the output results. So these documents are key data for results that we have received. If you have comments or suggestions, you're welcome to say. Now the market has become very unpredictable, but I have to remind you that we are coming into the process. We are not putting a full stop. We are opening the process. We have to monitor its realization, which includes what is happening on the market, whether what is happening on the market influences the realization of our policies or not, and to update it. That's what is very important, and we mustn't. So this is only the opening of the process. Thank you. I will.
Thank you. Just briefly, you have stated your mind in the document that we have sent to the ministry about the nuclear energy. So it's available at the website of the ministry and on our website as well. As for other fossil fuels like gas, I think that the cruel reality speaks clearly about the prospects of switching one fossil fuel by another fossil fuel. But another aspect of your question is financing. We have just identified 2 questions, and those are investments into energy transition and energy security. That's going to be the subject of our panels and consultations that will ensue. And now, just one comment. When you say that people can give comments, that's true. RERI got the access to the documents, and we think that RERI should not publish those documents. We are waiting for you to do that. So we have this privilege to see those documents, and for many reasons we think that it would not be good for us to publish that. That's not our practice. So once again, we are inviting you, as we have agreed at the previous meeting of the working group, to make these scenarios publicly aware and available. So now we have to stop in order to be prepared for the next session. So Alexandra, just be brief. Alexandra from the Independence Trade Union, and I'm interested how many working jobs will be affected by this transition, and what is the plan for the workers by 2030, because we are the biggest employer in the Republic of Serbia. So what is the plan for the workers during the transition? Thank you. Energy transition is something that is a challenge, especially for the Republic of Serbia and its energy sector. The integrated plan should, to some extent, define the processes of decarbonization. However, what you're asking specifically is a subject of another project that has already started, and the working group will be established for that. and that is just transition. That is the topic of the Just Transition project. We contacted 20 relevant institutions, the trade unions among them, and also there will be public calls for participation of civil society organization in this working group. Their task will be, from social and economic aspect, to deal with the analysis of energy transition so that it should be just transition. So that's the topic that in the next period we will be dealing with. I expect this will start quite soon. So we will come to those meetings. Thank you. Now we are going to go on a small break, short break. So those of you who are here with us, you can have some coffee. And if you're listening and watching through Zoom, you can watch a video, which is the introduction in the next panelist session. So we will start at 12:45.
Nastavljamo sa...
So we can continue with our work. When analyzing the documentation which was available to the working group and the scenarios, two issues arose, and there is first the issue of energy security in the process of energy transition, and the second issue, we are talking about very huge investments for the next 10 and then 20 years, and we thought about it. And the continuation of our discussion today refers to those two perspectives of the energy transition, investments in energy safety, and I would like to announce Mr. Aleksandar Kovacevic as the next speaker. Aleksandar, you have the floor. Thank you. The energy security and safety is an important concept. It tells us that it would be good if our energy would be available to us at the moment when we need it. That's a huge requirement for an energy system. Imagine that you are waiting at the tram station, and at that moment, when you get there, there is a tram, and that happens regularly. So that's what the energy system does. It makes it possible to us that every time when we turn on the heat or the switch or a dishwasher, that the energy is immediately available. From the point of view of infrastructure and economy of the system, that is a huge and difficult requirement. That's one dimension of the issue. The second dimension is energy which in the developed economy participates very little in forming the product. It enables that every other sector creates the national product. That characteristic, which is inherent in the economic system, tells us that when we don't have energy at a given moment, it reduces the national product employment hugely. That's what Nikola Tesla wrote in 1892 and 1900. So that problem of, on the other side, establishes huge requirements for the energy system, and on the other side, it tells us that energy can be very expensive, because its value for the creation of the national product is huge. In the economy, 1 megawatt hour of energy creates 30 times or 40 times higher national product than its product value. That tells us that somebody is maybe ready to pay for that megawatt hour a lot more. But it tells us also that if its price is higher, that one part of the foundation of the national product will be lacking. There will be only those users of the energy which have high productivity and who can earn a lot to have profit and to pay for the energy. That concept is a little delicate. Maybe we don't want all of those usages who cannot pay the high price of energy to, like, for instance, the water supply for a city. One of the biggest consumer of energy is the water company in Belgrade. How much can it pay for the energy? Heating of the population, how much can the heating company pay? If it pays more, then we have a pressure upon the salaries and retirements and the circulatory process and inflation, just like we saw in the movie previously. When the balance is lost, then it can come to huge disturbances and somebody can be left without his house. That's what this old movie showed us. So the price of energy is not only a market category. It cannot only be formed based on the demand and offer. There are also other circumstances where the economy has a reason to take care of the safety of supply, of energy supply. That's why energy safety is an important issue for the national energy policy. The agreement of energy community says that national energy policy has to deal with the energy efficiency, the environmental impact, safety of supply, but it does not refer to the investment. Investments are commercial investments. What is a commercial private investment? We have here the producer, we have the consumer. The producer produces and sells, and the consumer buys and consumes. And if the producer sells to somebody else and not the consumer, then these relations will be disturbed, whether the producer whether the producer will not be satisfied with the price and the consumer will not be satisfied with the supply, as soon as in between there is somebody else. That happens also in other situations in life. So we have a problem whenever we intervene in the relationship between the producer and the consumer. In Belgrade, for 20 years, 30 years, there has been there were situations where, for instance, a coffee shop is being closed, where we went to for 20, 30 years. People want to have that service because they went to that place for 20, 30 years from before the war. So the energy has also that dimension. The people expect to get the service day to day, every hour, in the way that they are used to. People with the heating system, they are expecting to have heating every day. Tomorrow we will talk about that. In order to provide for that, we need investments. It is necessary for the producer, the one who is supplying the energy, it is necessary that the producer is able to build enough facilities to use them in future and to replace them once their functioning is gone. But that's not so simple. The consumer who is consuming, he wants to be supplied and to have such a price that he is able to live comfortably with his incomes, to do what he normally does. That's also not very easy. We will talk about that tomorrow. So these two sides are very different. This side with investments is very unpopular in Serbia. We are investing very little in this area. And this other side thinks that to pay a lot for energy and be poor, that's what everybody does. We have a huge part of the population which is living in a type of energy poverty. But we will talk about that tomorrow. So what is it that is necessary in the area of investments so that this is sustainable? So I have prepared here a demonstration with this chessboard. I'm not really a chess person, but I will try to show. So let us imagine this situation. We have a company which wants to do a job. You can, for instance, choose food delivery or bus transportation. And they buy 5 vehicles. These are 5 vehicles. Where do they get the beginning capital? Let's not ask that indiscreet question. If they are used intensively, they cannot be used longer than 5 years. So we can say, okay, we have 5 vehicles, we will use them for 5 years. In these 5 years, we should earn enough to be able, in the 6th year, to have to be able to buy another 5 vehicles. But that's not so simple. If we decide to keep every year 20% of our income to save 20%, and then we will be able to buy another car in the first year. In the second year, we now have 6 vehicles and we are using them. And it seems that we will, at the end of the 6th year, be able to buy another car. And the 3rd year, another car. Then we have the 4th year with these 8 cars, and that's now the situation where we can buy 2 other cars. And of course, at the end of the 5th year, we can buy another 2 cars, sorry. So we are in the 5th. So now it would be necessary to replace some cars. So we don't have these cars anymore. But look at this. We have 7 cars now. We haven't replaced only 5. We have 2 more. That's called a multiplier of amortization. That's the correct use of. There is another difference. The 5 other cars were all the same. These 7 are not the same anymore. Every year we wanted to buy something which was a little better for the market, which was maybe a little more efficient or more modern. And so we are in the 6th year with 7 vehicles, which are totally different. If we have maintained the first 5 in a good way, maybe we were able to sell them. So maybe we could have buy for that money 1 completely new car. So now we have 8 vehicles from the starting 5. So let us now see a little later the colleagues from the stock market and the banking system will talk. Let us talk from the perspective of the bank or investor or buyer. When it comes to this company, the company is good balanced. Every year, the company bought something which is meaningful from the point of view of the market and the consumer. Every year, it asked the question, what is it which can best serve this market that we have? And what is the way how we can adapt to the changed regulations, new laws, new ecological obligations, and so on? Every year, there was an adaptation. What can we conclude about this company? Not only is its asset structure adapted correctly, not only does it reflect its activity at the market, but this is also a company with experience in adapting to the market. And that experience is integrated in the structure of the assets. But let us try again. The company buys the 5 cars at the beginning. In the first year, it has income. Everybody's happy. They pay out the stocks, spend the money, don't buy 1 car. Second year, business is good. They are spending again. Again, they pay off dividend and so on and so on. And we are in the 5th year. Everybody is happy. They haven't spent only the income and amortization from the current year. They have also not given to the company the experience of investment and multiplier of amortization. In the 5th year, this company is a very risky company. It has assets which are very homogeneous. Regulation is changed. The assets are out of the picture. Something is, 1 car is not working. It seems there is a chance that all of the cars will stop working. What have we done then? In the last 3 months, the energy economy of Serbia, with 4,450 megawatt installed power in the lignite power plants, has in only a few days managed to produce 3,000 megawatt. The facilities are of similar age, similar technology, with the same fuel used in the same way. A fantastically risky company for investment for the future and so on. But let us leave this unpopular aspect of investments by side. If we are talking about energy assets, this is how the energy safety has become risky. So we are now in the situation that homogeneous assets are a problem, a risk for the supply security. That's the connection between efficiently used assets and the company and what we have here.
In those 5 years, many things have happened. We have spent a lot. We had increased national product. We employed some people. We had some, we thought that we had security of supply. How can we actually leave these? At least for a little bit to work. At least a little bit more. One of those is broken, but these 4, we can leave them to work somehow. Maybe. But the company is still not good. The skills to maintain homogeneous assets is not investment and market capability guaranteeing the security of supply. It's just not like that for these reasons. Now, of course, there are many interests that are connected with the company. This colleague asked about the workers. Their interest is not to lose their jobs. The probability that they will not lose their jobs in this company with homogeneous assets is a very small one. it's most probable that they will lose their jobs. The probability of these consumers to get a stable supply by this company is also slight. Probably there will be some problems with security of supply. So here we're talking about the probabilities, and now it would be good to face this probability this year in the case of Serbia, so in the year 2022, and to look back in the past, considering that we have spent our resources, these assets, in a good way. We have to see what else do we need to do. It's not a simple task. Of course, my colleagues, economists, like fiscal approach to the problem. They like to have nominal financial view. They say total debts are that much. We have the balance of public finances, balance sheet, and so on. But no, the total debts must include this circumstance: spending of the assets that happened in the meantime. This opportunity cost of this multiplicator of amortization must appear. With all the skills of the engineers, technicians, and so on, the probability of decline cannot be avoided. It has a price. So we come to the question, in this situation, how can we invest? The answer leads us to a gambling approach. Let's believe that it will not be cancelled right away. We have this experience. We go to a gambling shop, we gamble on some results at a football match, and we believe this is going to happen. Not a bad idea, but there are people who live in this way. But the stakes are a bit too high when we talk about energy security. Perhaps we can find someone, we can find an excellent engineer, and he says, don't worry, I'm going to fix this. This is going to work without any problems for some time. It's like an excellent friend that you meet at the entrance at the betting shop, and he says, I know for sure this football match will have this result, of course. You can find them everywhere, more or less. But the stakes are too high, that's the problem. It's very difficult in this homogeneous assets to determine the probability of this technical cancellation and how long this can realistically last and what is economically feasible out of all this. One thing is for sure, you're not going to invest in the same assets. No, this is not what you're going to do. You need to quickly learn what the market demands and how you are going to provide the security of supply in a different way. So you need to see how, by using this available assets in the shortest possible time, you will get to the situation with 8 vehicles, for example, of different technology and age and so on. And of course, with very low probability for everything to fail at the same time. This is a very serious task. It demands a different view of the problem. So now we have, of course, we can say, okay, we need a lot of time for this task. And then this is going to last. It lasted 40 years. What can we do? Maybe it can last for 10, 15, 20 years. Why not? But no. The probability of technical failure, this curve of experience, tells us that this device that works, and then there is this curve that is declining in performance. There is this sudden decline. Actually, the sharp increase of the probability of failure. That's the experience that happens in different technical systems like shapes, infrastructure, and so on, technical devices. So there is a limited working age, and as soon as we face these limitations, the better. Of course, these expectations that this is going to last could be seen differently. You can say, well, I'm planning new investments, and this planning is going to last for 2 or 5 years, or something like that. You can say, I'm going to think about it. And my conclusion is that the new excellent technology will be available in 10 years' time. Great. What are you going to do with this probability of failure? So here we're talking about the following. The industry is functioning on what is available now. And on a proper use of assets that are available right now. So how can we reduce this probability of failure? For example, we don't have to use these devices. That's a solution. We just put these vehicles aside, we don't use them, and if they're not used, there are slight chances that they're going to break down. For example, we did this winter. We imported electricity. So that is reducing the degree of using the existing structures, and it is prolonging their lifespan. It was a bit more expensive and more difficult, but as we have seen, it functioned for the time being. And that's one way. We can reduce the consumption. The national product doesn't have to be like that. Not everyone has to be employed. If it's important for us to keep these people with these equipment, the consequence could be that some other people, some other industry are without a job. All those investors that came here expecting that electricity will be cheaper and our biggest exporters, for example. This is also a possibility. So from this point, there is a multitude of options. We are now in the middle of the campaign, of course, so we will have a retrospective of ideas concerning this topic. No one is going to accept the job to develop investments and manage such assets and companies. Watch the TV and read the papers and you will see that this is not being mentioned. There's going to be so many fantastic ideas, like in a betting shop. These guys are going to win, or those guys over there. There is a player there with extraordinary possibilities. He's going to score 3 goals. Ronaldo gave 3 goals, right? Yes. So we need to wait a bit, and that could happen. Unfortunately, as long as we have this structure of assets, the possibility and probability of failure is growing. And this cannot be avoided. There is another side of investment, much more popular. It's called divestment, so the loss of investment. Can we see the video? This question I did this in 2019. There was a conference like this one, and I thought it would be useful to have like an advertisement. People like this. But let's see. I mean, I'm not going to talk about this. This is going to go on right now. And now we have the next issue.
Here we have the other issue. What are the consumers doing as long as we have this situation? What are they doing? The consumers, the citizens, are keeping in banks huge savings, and they are having savings with very low interest rates. They are not even thinking about investing it in energy efficiency or energy project bonds. They are not even thinking about it. Why? Do they see something that we are not seeing? They thinking that this situation will guarantee them the supply safety. Maybe they are wrongly informed. Maybe they don't see an opportunity to improve energy efficiency and to achieve better supply safety and safety of their savings than in the bank. A very small event, a war in a faraway country. The consequence of that last week and this week, the difference between the exchange rates and some prices increased and margins. So the market reacted immediately and registered the increased risk. Who paid for that? Who is paying for that? The savings are paying for that. Now we have not a small interest rate, but a negative interest rate, especially for foreign currencies. When a similar situation happened in Cyprus a few years, many years ago, the state took above a certain limit part of the savings which were in the banks. That's not something unknown. Something similar happened in the beginning of the 90s with the so-called old savings in foreign currencies. So we have to ask the question, what is it which is in the way of investments into sustainable, reliable energy, which can guarantee the supply safety? That information, legal circumstances, the availability of technology, is it the approach to the consumer? What is it which makes it impossible for us? An important thing is this assets. These assets are working. There is a possibility of decline, but it is there. And if I want to have a regular company and to invest with the goal to have amortization and to create what we showed previously, I cannot be competitive with the price of these assets. How long can it last? We don't know. The probability of failure is increased, but how much? How is it going to be materialized? So we are coming to a to the key situation. I have to wait for the failure for this to stop working so that I can do this. This is how I have a reliable access to the consumer. Besides the material and physical failure, there is also the failure which is legal or the consequence of legal circumstances. For instance, we knew that one part of energy plants, according to the energy agreement on energy community, has accepted derogation of 20,000 hours between 2018 and 2023, and has accepted the obligation to close these facilities after these 20,000 hours. The first facility like that is the energy plant Pljevlje in Montenegro, has spent the 20,000 hours in November 2020. Nothing happened. That power plant is still working. A few days ago, we could read in the newspapers the statement of the director, operator of that power plant, which says that that company has good financial results, that the prices of the energy in the region are high, and that the company could export from the facility for which nobody has expected that it would still be working. So we still have a facility which is working with a probability of failure. Of course, that power plant has had a few very serious failures last year. The uncertainty is here the topic. So every investor is confronted with uncertainty. That uncertainty can have a reverse character. We can have the situation in which the state says, okay, this was really great for 40 years. We can now find a foreign creditor which will create another same situation. And if this fails working, we will still have what we had. Possible. Such a political decision is possible, but it guarantees us that we will be deeper in the risk of supply. Everything else apart from the regular commercial company guarantees that from time to time we will have an escalation of risk of the supply safety. That escalation can be in parts, as we had in December. It could be total, as it was in Kosovo. It can be latent, as it was present in Montenegro. It can be commercial, as it is in part of Bosnia, where the decision was made that if a part of the industry, for instance, the aluminum factory is closed, and then more or less everything will be fine. So there are different ways how the risk of supply safety can be materialized. The more we spend, that risk is higher. So what we most certainly know is that energy efficiency would help, but that's also a type of investment. Would it be good? 25% of the power in Serbia is used for the production of sanitary warm water. Maybe that could be done with solar systems. But the nighttime power is 4 times cheaper. These assets, part of the value of the assets are transferred to the consumers through the very cheap nighttime price, which enables such an investment in solar panels. So that risk can be transferred. So uncertainty is the key for the supply safety. And we can now repeat that in all versions, uncertainty here and there. But what are we expecting from the National Energy and Climate Plan? We are expecting the reduction of uncertainty. To say precisely what are the intentions when it comes to the energy policy, interest rates, consumption, and other circumstances which would reduce certainty and enable somebody to invest in something different. We get another situation. We get statements which say, yes, it would be good to invest in this or that scenario or the third scenario. So let us go back to the betting shop. Yes, we don't have to meet one person which will recommend one result of one football game. We can meet 20, 30 persons who will give us 20 or 30 recommendations. All of them will be equally fine or equally bad. That's a problem. So the main part of the question that I cannot answer is the energy company in Serbia is the operator of the assets. What do they know about the assets? What is their vision of the future and the risk of technical failure, the risk of the supply, safety for fuel? What can be done, and what is the way to drain more economic value from that in order to ensure the safety of supply. That's it. Thank you. We will now have a short break, just 5 minutes, and then we can continue with discussion.
Nastavljamo dalje. Nastavljamo dalje. Evo, Aleksandar Kovačević je postavio figure na ovoj šahovskoj tabli i otvorio pitanje investicija. I ja ne bih da puno dužim, osim što bih da najavim naše sagovornike u narednom panelu. Veliko mi je zadovoljstvo što mogu da najavim gospodina Branislava Jorgića i gospodina Vladimira Vasića iz Jorgić Broker i iz Udruženja banaka Srbije. Dakle, pitanje za ovaj panel jesu finansijska tržišta, stvaranje preduslova za razvoj finansijskog tržišta, komercijalnih investicija koje će nam omogućiti odgovor na pitanje sa prethodnog panela, a to je kako doći do sigurnosti snabdevanja energijom kroz investicije. Gospodin Jorgiću, vi ste prvi, izvolite.
Da, hvala. Pa evo, ako mogu kratko samo da se predstavim, Jorgić Branislav, ekonomista, radio sam u energoprojektu 12 godina, to je...
Yes, I have worked in Energoprojekt for 12 years. So after that, I have worked in the local and foreign financial market, capital market. And my task here is to take a look at the overview to finance energy transition based on the capital market. And I have covered the local market, so both the stock market and over-the-counter market, both local and international. Let's analyze a Serbian market, capital market. First of all, who can collect capital through the Belgrade Stock Exchange? The state through bonds, then private companies through bonds as well, and private companies that are organized as joint stock companies, so they can just list shares on a stock exchange. So what's the situation on a Belgrade Stock Exchange, this local market? Let's see whether there are potential to have some funds from there. So the infrastructure is complete. It's quite operational as for the stock exchange trading and local market, capital market. But the scope and the turnover is quite symbolic because according to our tradition, we are more focused on banks. So the capital is sought from the banks, not through the stock exchange. Then the privatization started in 2001 or 2, and it served as a change of ownership from one hands into the other. And there was it was not a place to collect additional capital. Apart from that, there was no legal security. Some irregularities happened, especially in 2008 to 2010, actually, and the investors lost the trust in stock exchange. So then, in a way, there was this trend of the state for the big companies are sold through tenders or in bilateral agreements. So what's the consequence of this situation? Well, Serbia is the net exporter of equity capital. So our citizens are investing more abroad than the foreigners are investing in Serbia, which proves that certain capital intended for these investments that we are talking about today exist, but we just need to create conditions for this capital to be engaged. And what are the necessary changes so that the energy transition could take place by financing through stock exchange? So first of all, there should be the readiness of the state to renounce 100% of the ownership in the energy sector, so that certain part of their ownership should be given to the shareholders through listing the shares or through the initial public offering. So the second step after this readiness of the state is the transformation of public companies to change their status, so they should become joint stock companies. The third step would be that the energy companies should be listed on the stock exchange. And another important element is to switch from the price of energy as a social category into the price of energy as a commercial category, because those who would invest in such newly organized companies expect profit. If the companies have social prices and they're dealing with social policy of a country, there's no profit and the investors are not interested. So they also need to gain trust of both local and foreign investors on a stock exchange market. And the precondition for that is political stability, economic stability, and legal security. If these three conditions are fulfilled, then there are interesting securities through bonds and shares from energy sector. Then there are real conditions to attract capital from that market. What are the advantages of companies being listed on a stock exchange? So why should the energy sector consider this? First of all, we get the control of shareholders over the company. So if the state has a share, another share is left to small shareholders, so it would gain co-owners that would also control the business activities of the company. And as a consequence, there would be increased efficiency of the business. We would have publicly transparent business operations, and they would have the obligation to report. In that way, that would gain trust and it would impact the business of the company. Today, we don't have the transparency. The informations are very hard to get, so we practically don't know what's going on there. And the most important thing, why we are talking about this, we would get unlimited sources of financing for those companies in the energy sector through the shares emissions or bonds issuance. So what are the potential companies that I see on that market? First of all, that's EPS, or Electric Industry of Serbia. In that way, they could finance the improvement of the situation of existing capacities and build new green capacities and develop new capacities with mixed ownership structure. Of course, I'm talking about green energy. Then there could be some new energy companies that would build hydro power plants, solar power plants, wind parks, and other new technologies. So if there are these new conditions, the financial resources for these companies would be unlimited. Those who cannot gain this money, not everyone can do this on this market. So we have small companies that are dealing with companies that are putting up solar panels or heat pumps, biofuel, and so on. So these are the companies that should turn to their own financial means, or banking sector, or the state. Those are not the companies for the stock exchange. So international market would be available if, I mean, it goes the same as for the local market. There should be a history of listing of those companies on a local market, which means that it's not realistic to expect that a company would go to an international stock exchange if they do not fulfill the previous conditions. If they are not already listed on a Belgrade Stock Exchange, however, there is this over-the-counter market. All the companies can be there, but there's certain weakness. You're never sure whether you have the best conditions for this company. And then, of course, it's important to know that this international market has no limitations in terms of capital that could be accumulated. So I'm going to tell you about the international experience and our experience regarding the subject matter that I've mentioned. We frequently like to compare ourselves with Germany. We have two energy companies. Those are RWE and EON from Germany. So they are listed on the stock exchange, and they practically have expanded actually enormously because they had unlimited sources of finance through local German stock exchange and some other international stock exchanges. So RWE had an affair, and there was a scandal in 2017 because they were based on production of coal, and they expanded. They were cutting down forests and so on, and the public was quite resistant to such activities, so they stopped doing that. And additionally, the government prohibited, they gave them some deadlines to stop producing energy from nuclear power plants. So they are based on those classic sources of energy. But after these disturbances, they switched to green energy very quickly, owing to the unlimited resources for finance that enable them to be on the stock market. So we had another example, Fintel company. They had the IPO, but it's a small company in conditions when there was not enough trust in the stock exchange, so their IPO barely succeeded, and that's not the right example to approach the stock market businesses. So we have the electrical industry of Serbia. These strong companies are the real example how this transformation should take place. And in the end, I will give you another conclusion. So what can be concluded? First of all, we need to build trust in the stock exchange because it was lost in the previous period. It's possible to build this. It's difficult, but it's possible. Then we need to transform the electrical industry into a joint stock company. So not a public company, but a joint stock company, so that their shares could be listed on a stock exchange. They can also issue bonds, of course. Then it's necessary for the state to pass a decision to renounce part of the ownership by selling the shares through the stock exchange through an organized IPO, and at 100% of ownership, they should lower their share in such a company. There should be the electrical company should be listed on a stock exchange, so nothing can be done overnight. So it's 3 to 5 years. If we start today in such a procedure to regain trust for apps, we need to accumulate this capital. We need at least 3 years, most probably 5 years, in order for this process to take place. How realistic it is to go into such a procedure? I can tell you that in the last 20 years, there was no readiness. I mean, the governments that came starting from the year 2000 were not ready to renounce the ownership of public enterprises in the sector of energy. Whether that's going to happen in the future, we shall see. That's all. Thank you very much.
poslovanje i naša berza broji mnoge godine, 150 I nešto godina. Tu tradiciju imamo sad
I have
po brojku.
to mention we have 150 years of tradition of the stock exchange. I think that the best period of our stock exchange was until 1941, 42, and then everything that happened in the 90s. I think that there was nothing until 2001. And then in 2001, the way how the privatization worked, that normally influences whether the broad public can realize what stock exchange means. I'm working in the banking system for years, and I was also the director of the investment fund. And I think that this could be one path. Czechia had a voucher privatization. It divided to its citizens vouchers, and everybody could participate in the privatization. That's one source. And another source is the size of the market. The Serbian market has 5.5 million citizens who are older than 18 years of age. They have a potential investment. I'm not sure that we have a critical since we have a stock exchange in Podgorica, in Ljubljana, in Zagreb. I don't know whether a regional cooperation could achieve better contribution with everything that you said, Mr. Jorgic. When it comes to the banking sector, in this green transition, green agenda, we have been for 10 years. And we see that through a few credit lines of the EBRD, of the European Investment Bank, which is being placed through banks. And that's a fine mechanism which defines to whom and how much money can be given with a certain risk. When it comes to the banking sector and how the green agenda impacts the banking market and the commercial banks, the banks are those who which approve funds, and they have certain criteria who will get a green loan. And that's why you have to fulfill certain criteria to get those funds. On the other side, the existing portfolio of banks is also subject to changes, to climate changes, which means that the fact that you have built a hotel at 1,400 meters, that's when you had a meter of snow there, it doesn't mean that 10 years later that hotel will be still in a snowy zone and that it will be profitable. So that's one of the examples how the climate changes impact the existing portfolio of banks. Our banks, most of our banks are connected to the European Union, more of 80% of them. And all of those policies having to do with the green agenda are positioned, are part of the business policy of the banks. When it comes to the banking system here, most of our deposits are short-term deposits. That means that if you have short-term deposits, then it's very difficult to transform them and transfer them to long-term financing. And all of the projects which are part of the green agenda, most of them require long-term approach, 5, 10 or more years in order to receive an expected profit. So that's a challenge which shows that emission of long-term bonds could maybe influence the stability of financing sources to finance such projects. When you go through Serbia and ask whether there is need, I'm sure that there is need. It all relies on the education of the users of banking services, not only in the corporate world, but also the population. Last week, there was the business forum in Kopaonik, When you see compounding, it looks great, invested a lot, but when you go in direction Josanička Banja or Brus, then you see houses and maybe not even 1 out of 10 is finished with insulation, with elements which could be part of this contribution to ecology, to reduction of energy consumption, and so on. So there are needs. The communication is maybe, I have tried to find a reason why the people don't finish houses. There is a material aspect of it. The state is, however, trying and is giving subsidies for windows and insulation. And when you multiply the number of houses with these subsidies, then you see that there are initiatives which have to do with the green agenda, and those are the new motor of economies. And now we have also this energy crisis. Before that, we had the COVID crisis. So there has to be found a way what to do in future. In the 90s or in the middle of the 90s, there was the internet which came, and that was a new dimension to all of us, for all of us. And now though we already have green loans for the last, have been having for the last 10 years, but maybe this is now the moment for the banks and all other participants in the process to work on that now again. Of course, we are for environmental protection and energy efficiency, and also for renewable energy sources. This dependence of non-renewable energy sources, we see what it looks like today. The topic of gas and 1,000 cubic meters reached 3,000 euro. Now the prices are a little down. So that's all psychology. If you expect that it will be good, you will behave as it is like that. So, and if you feel that something is wrong, then you will keep what you have in your pocket, and you will not be spending, and then you will slow down the economy. And as a professional association of banks of Serbia, we have been existing since 1923. They with the goal to connect among each other. And the essence of the association lies in looking at what exists in the world, whether we can exchange our experiences with somebody else. And in 2020, we have, with the International Financial Corporation, signed an agreement which aims at stimulating the experience exchange in the field of the green agenda. There are banks associations from all over the world. There are very interesting projects, and we are and we will continue to give our contribution in order to accelerate this green transformation and to make it another element of the growth of the social product. If there are questions, I will be glad to answer. Thank you. I hope that there will be questions. I will give again the advantage to our participants on Zoom. Nobody raised their hand. Are there questions from the audience here? Good day. I am Branislava Kovačević. I am here on behalf, I am the president of the Association for the Rights of the Energy of Serbia, but this is my personal question. I am dealing with a very similar topic. I am dealing with the rights of energy, and for us, it is always very interesting to know the aspects of financing. So I would like to ask everybody a question. First of all, Mr. Jorgic, what you mentioned about the possibilities of additional capitalization of the energy company of Serbia with all of these conditions. What are the reasons why it hasn't been done so far? And maybe one of them, the provision of supply safety. The state expects that somebody should care about the safety of supply. And is it possible if the additional capitalization is enabled with all of these preconditions that you mentioned? How would it then be possible for the state to keep the element of the companies to make sure to enable the safety and to at the same time enable this different way of investing? And for you also a question. I'm very glad to hear that the Association of Banks is dealing with this new processes in the area of energy. They are now part of the energy transition, and we are now having this new package of regulations in the area of energy, which are stimulating and this process of energy transition and the awareness of citizens and the new aspects which are happening in the world in the last 15 days, which are also bringing a new need to think about how this change will impact the energy transition. Maybe you can tell us from your perspective, for every transition investments are necessary. Give us some examples. What is it that was successful and that could be a pathway for all others to follow? So the first question was, why hasn't anything been done so far in that sector? Well, first of all, that's something, so to say, new, and there is a certain fear from the unknown. That's an objective thing, but there are maybe also subjective things, and that's that the state wants to keep control over those key sectors of the economy. But I will give you an example which shows that that state is wrong. And the second part of the question was whether the state can ensure the supply safety for the electricity in conditions of privatization and waiving part of the ownership. Well, the best example is the fuel company of Serbia, oil company of Serbia, NIS. It was sold to Gazprom Neft in the amount of 50 and a little bit more %, and thus it now control the oil supply. Yes, we don't have any problems with the supply, and we have price control. So that can be done also with the energy company. The the state is creating safety with the legal regulations and not with the ownership structure. That's the main thing. The second thing, we have an example which is successful. I mean, the oil company of Serbia, which has become a profitable company, and they have paid around 300 million euro into the budget of Serbia from the privatization, and half of it was sold for 100 million euros. The oil company of Serbia has so far not used the possibility of financing through the emission of bonds because they had their own reserves to finance, to do the financing from their own sources or from the majority shareholder Gazprom Neft. But it is not excluded that it will in the next period go to financing at the open market, stock exchange market, so that the oil company, oil industry is a good example that we can have a good and efficient company which is growing in every aspect. And on the other side, that the state has control over the supply safety and that it has the possibility to control the prices. So that example of the oil company of Serbia can be used also on the energy company.
We're talking about the oil industry. It's too complex. It's not so simple because this is not our topic today, but yes, but that's energy sector. Yes, yes, but it's too wide, this topic, the bilateral interstate agreements. Let's not go into that. But the part that you have mentioned, you said additional capital. Just looking at that mechanism, everything is complicated. Yes, yes. But is it possible through that mechanism to keep, apart from regulatory framework, that's fine, but through this mechanism of structuring the companies and additional capital injection, is it possible to keep this component? Well, if the tendency is to keep the system of management, then we should change everything. It should be 100% state-owned. It's going to be like it is today, but as much as I can remember, notice, we are trying to increase the efficiency. So far, it was unsuccessful. So now we are, I mean, we should start with the change of ownership structure in order to have better efficiency and additional control and additional capital accumulation. You heard from the state officials that there was no money for the overhaul, the old electrical industry is obsolete. It says that there's not enough money, we don't have an efficient way of management, so the company is not efficient. So something has to be changed. As for the NIS, the oil company of Serbia, you're probably talking about the low prices. But it's important to finish with that as well, you know. Yes, it was not market. There was no market price. Yes, 400 or 800 million euros. What does it mean, stock exchange? At the moment, this company is worth is 700 million. So those who are criticizing the low price, they can go and buy the shares. They're cheaper now, then they can make additional income. So the topic is complex, but you need to know about that. You need to know how to swim in that. You have to find your way. The same as the market dictates. Thank you. I apologize. No. Thank you for this question. I don't know I was born in 1975, so you probably remember we didn't have many TV channel. At 7:15 there was a cartoon, but there was an excellent Australian company where this bearded guy in the 80s was telling us about the environmental protection. And if someone remembers that, he was looking at how some lakes in Australia are disappearing and what should people do. And then he was putting this tile in the toilet in order to reduce the volume of water there. And he said that we could save a lake if everyone was to do that. I mean, younger populations don't know about that, but we who were born in 1975 and in the 80s, we used to watch that. I heard that he died a few years ago, but he was telling us about the need to protect the environment. And we're talking a lot about that. I have some friends in family in Switzerland. My cousin came and I'm throwing away a battery in a bin, and he says, no, don't do that. Do you have something? 20 years ago, he told me, no, recycle it. And I said, we don't have that. And he said, we in Switzerland have a special place for that. And of course, when you go to Switzerland, you have 16 different places to recycle. So this is this culture, and as you said, favorable prices, and we have some sort of protection. If the prices were completely commercial, then it would be 3.5 euros per 1 liter, but we wouldn't have 145 or 150 or whatever. So euros, yes. So I think that we should have a market economy, but the market will not help you much in this situation. You need to create a balance. But so many things have passed through the Balkans, and we just try to catch up, and something happens. Then again, and so on. It's in cycles. So I'm a person who says, okay, we can do that. Let's see what we can do. We have water, we have wind. It's important to find investors. I don't know whether our people can do that. We are probably throwing batteries in a bin, and people who live 2 hours away by plane 20 years ago, they were recycling those batteries. So it will come here one day. But the circular economy, I mean, I always say there are several things. We have the greenhouse gases effect, consumption of energy, usage of water, pollution of air, circular economy, and impact on the economic system. And most of the bank has recognized this. Let's reward those who have circular economy, or those who are destroying less or are not polluting so much. So there are credit lines for that, but I don't think that's sufficient on its own. We don't have this awareness. There's a startup from the States. People have a funding platform, so you can choose where you're going to invest. High risk, low risk, no risk at all, or 100 euros is how much you need to invest. And in 2 months, they collected $14 billion drop by drop. But that's how it functions. You need to trust. It's hundreds of years of trust. Invest $100, you become an owner of co-owner of something, but you cannot explain here that you're part of something. This responsibility and connectivity with the surrounding. Somehow here we need to talk a lot about this. It's a cultural thing. And the use of water in Switzerland. I was 14 years. When you when you brush your teeth, you just put the tap water on. here it's normal, but there it's not. And then they are saying, why are you letting this water go? It's not for free. You just put a little bit of water in your brush and then brush your teeth and then turn the water on. I mean, that's a cultural thing. There are a lot of these topics, but we need to speak a lot about that because I have never took a chewing gum and threw it away somewhere. Nobody told me. But go to the city square, main square in the city that was reconstructed 2 years ago. Who did that? It's not aliens. We did that. It's full of chewing gums. That's something that, I mean, we need to invest a lot in education, and I think that it's connected with these things. We are thinking we have strategic goals and wind parks and sustainability and so on, and how we can finance that. But we have this everyday life where we small people can do a lot for this world, and it can be much better. Thank you. There was a raised hand, Milica.
Izvolite, može.
You have the floor, but we do not hear you. I don't think that the microphone is on. We do not hear you. Can you hear me now? Yes, now it's better. Something wrong with the earphone. Sorry. I've been listening the whole day. It's very interesting and useful, especially now this discussion about the market and energy sources. But I'm just interested whether, in this context, have we thought about this Ukraine situation, because we have a quite turbulent situation in terms of energy, gas, since Russia is one of the primary sources of gas for Europe. And this affects the entire economy and stability in the European region, and of course, Western Balkans countries as well. So I'm interested whether the drafting of such documents, like the ones that we're talking about today, to these events that can change the entire perception and generally everything that we are talking about are considered. I'm just interested to hear your comment about this. I will be brief. First of all, the current situation tells us that we should increase independence from energy sources. And in order to do that, we need to find the financial sources. That's all from my side. So that's the answer.
Uvijek kad je neka kriza, naravno, pokušavate da procenite šta dolazi, šta donosi dan, šta donosi noć. Inače je to sastavni deo bankarskog poslovanja, jer mi upravljamo rizicima.
So that is always a risk, and once it happens, the banks are thinking what is the impact upon the portfolio and how they will be able to function, not before of the banks, but because of the whole society on the one side, and on the other side, what can be done in a short period of time. Here in our region, we know what the sanctions are and what the transition is, and unfortunately also what is happening in the Ukraine. And we are always saying why everything has to happen to us. But that has also taught us to find alternatives quickly, to think And I think that that Europe and the EU could have known maybe that this would happen. Have they done anything to reduce their dependence? And now that it happened, now we have it. Are the sanctions painful for Russia? I'm sure that they are as painful to the EU. The price has gone up in Greece. Electricity has gone up 500%, but that's the market. So then also the state has to interfere in order for the people to have electricity and to be able to pay it. So whatever it looks like, the crisis is always an opportunity to create something new. We were excellent at thinking of something new, creative. So that's also the job of these managers. If the path through the Ukraine is not functional, then let us go through other countries. So I'm also sure that we are now pushed more additionally towards the green agenda, and the EU will find funds for these things. And part of that will also be our job, definitely.
Da li ste možda htjeli, pošto ste... hvala. Dobar dan, ja sam Milica Peštarić, advokatica, sam u oblasti energetike.
Hello, my name is Milica Peštarić, a lawyer. I would like to add up to what we talked about. This first topic, which has to do with the sale and portfolio, I'm not sure why that is not an excellent example. But when it comes to EPS, the energy company, it has a broader problematic when it comes to the corporatization of that company. And I'm not sure that if something has not been changed between 2018 and today, and because of COVID, probably not, EPS cannot write down all of its assets and make an inventory. So when it comes to the management of EPS is also problematic because of the OECD principles. I don't know how much they have implemented the recommendations that they have received in the sense of how the company is exercising its ownership rights in EPS. That's why I think that EPS is on a thin ice, although this idea sounds great and it would be good if it would work in a coming period. But when it comes to EPS, I am pessimistic, and that's probably why we are having these situations with the energy instability as we had in the previous period. So that was a comment. But I have a question about the risk management and financing projects from renewable sources. When it comes to the feed-in tariffs, it seems that it was more predictable, and now we have these premiums and auctions and this energy crisis. So I would like to ask, what do you think about that? Because I have recently talked with managers from some banks, and they are very pessimistic because they say that their prognosis that they were not correct, and they are not optimistic when it comes to financing projects. They will finance them because functional banks in Serbia are part of some international systems, and the premiums have been introduced in other countries. So they will copy successful models, but now for the beginning, the functioning of premiums and auctions and financing of projects, and not to mention those who are not interested in incentives, but would immediately want to have a corporate and commercial PPEs. So what do you think, how will the banks be in the mood for financing. So the energy is a strategic resource, and I'm sure that everything which happens here is the result of that. Everybody needs it. It is just a question of the fact that the banks are private institutions which are monitoring the situations on the market, and they are projecting the future. And if you had asked me months ago whether somebody will attack another country, I would have said no, but I also was wrong when Serbia was attacked. So, but we have to take into account these elements that you mentioned, these changes with the price of energy is so different, and depending on the duration of the conflict, it depends when the market will quiet down, and time is also resource number one. And we never have enough, not Serbia, but everybody. And so some incentives, which I'm sure the EU will adopt as soon as possible. Although I'm not an expert for energy, but I've been reading about it, and it says that Serbia has a potential for around 10 wind parks more. We have 3 or 4 around Vršac in the Vojvodina. There are some private investors, but they haven't touched the part in direction Majdanpek and all of those mountains. It is probably more difficult to build the wind parks over there, so it is a huge investment. But banks, even if they enter such projects, if they are bigger projects, they want to share the risk with private investors or others. So the potential is definitely there, but we have to see what is the alternative that will be very necessary for some future generations. I wanted also to ask you, you mentioned certain waiving of the state from the participation in ownership for a fee. Yes, but I would like to ask you for which percentage. You mentioned some 30%, and there are examples in the minority practice of 30%, also in international practice, which enables certain control over the management of the company. And so what percentage would be sufficient? Maybe a majority share? You mentioned 70%, and that it is even enough to have 30%. So I would like to know, what do you think, what would be the balance and which ownership structure, although you said that that's not something which is important for the management, but which ownership structure would enable to keep certain control in the hands of the state in such a strategically important company? And also for Mr. Vasic, I have the impression that when we are now talking about the role of the banks, that we are looking at it from the perspective of a socially responsible business activity. But I think that the role of the bank, of the banking sector, is larger than that. The banks are not only turned to their own activities, they have a certain influence when it comes to socially responsible financing. And there are certain signs in our banking system of that, and that's my question. Do you know about any new tendencies? Because the banking sector can influence directly to the socially responsible business activity and the financing by encouraging certain investors and giving them some expectations to those who are investing in new energy sources, or you can create a list as it happens in international banking institutions and say we are not financing certain projects because of the influence upon the environment. So do you think that the bank should follow trends and make certain decisions based on them, or can it be an active participant who can create certain atmosphere which will lead to investment decisions which would be better for from the point of view of the environment? So when it comes to the percentage of ownership in NECP,
oko 20% su mali akcionari, i s druge strane
the state has 30% to 20% small shareholders and more than 50% of Gazprom. That is a problem. The state has 30% and the majority shareholder more than 50%. With the energy company, it doesn't have to be like that. The state can have 25 to 30%, even in these huge corporations. When the state has 30% and all the rest is dispersed among shareholders, then the control is there. But so 25 to 30% is okay if you don't have a huge majority shareholder, but dispersed ownership of small shareholders. Then there is also a story which has to do with explanations why something is not being done. The energy company cannot be, for instance, organized because those are only excuses. If somebody doesn't want to do anything, there will always be excuses. But at the same time, our investors, they are looking for solutions. What are their solutions? They have the right to invest also abroad, and they say if they cannot buy the energy company in Serbia, they cannot, then they will buy the energy company in Germany. And why are they now buying shares in a German company and not in our country? That's the answer. Is there awareness or education? Of course, not with everybody, but also abroad, not everybody is investing. There are investment funds who are helping people invest. But the problem in Serbia is that I, as an educated investor, have to invest with a certain level of risk that I assess. I cannot buy shares of energy company because they have some excuses. And then I take my money and then I buy shares of the energy company of Germany. For whom is that good? That's good for the German economy and not for my country. And that will, just to answer about the banking system has for the last 10 years, through concrete examples, has been supporting the economy and the citizens. There is this green credit line, which from the funds of the portfolio of the bank and also from the credit lines of the European Investment Bank and the EBRD. And there are also bans on crediting. That's also an element which is not only indirectly, but also directly impacting those who are looking for credits. Yes, if you have circular economy or just a small percentage of fossil fuels and so on. So that's how it works. There are criteria. Of course, we could do more, and I'm sure that we are here to support the economy and the citizens. Thank you all for participating today in person and on Zoom. We will continue tomorrow with discussions about the development of the policy development and poverty reduction. We wanted here to discuss issues dealing with the economic aspects, which have shown to be very important in the process of planning and creation of the National Energy and Climate Plan. See you tomorrow again at the same time and at the same place. We are inviting all of you to come again tomorrow, and who is here with us, you are all invited for a small cocktail. Thank you.